Joni, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing well. So excited to have you for your first episode of AI for Anyone Live. I know you joined us sort of behind the scenes last week, but we are so excited to have you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So for those of you joining us for the first time, I am Sami Zoss with the Human Stack, and I'm so excited to introduce you to. She's new to me, but she's definitely not new to Tim and his chaos and sort of the life that is him. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I just love any excuse to use my air horn. So everybody, give me a nice warm welcome for Joni here joining us with the Human Stack. Joni, if you want to give a little, just sort of who are you? How do you know Tim? How are you back with the Human Stack and what your role kind of looks like as we know it, right? We know everything changes with Tim. So
Yeah. So I'm Joni-ing Martin. I joined Tim's company back in 2013, but my background's in nonprofits. So I'm a human services person. I founded my first nonprofit when I was 19, and then I was ED of a couple of nonprofits. Most recently, Strongwater Farm in Massachusetts, where we did equine therapy. And I worked with Tim for about 7 years at Now It Matters, his previous iteration. And it was amazing because he opened my eyes a lot to the
gave
the
you a
things
lot of
that
gray
tech.
hair, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But he also showed me like a lot of the possibilities with tech. And I loved consulting with him, working with him. And then I started my own thing in 2020 that was really about my own research. I've been researching storytelling and the intersection of cultural mythology and our personal mythology, because having been in social justice and human services for 25 years, I know that the story changes things, and the story that we know and the story that we believe and tell changes everything. And so I spent about 5 years kind of deconstructing that and figuring out what it was pointing to. And during that 5 years, I had a lot of life transition and transformation. And so at the this past year has been really rough. I lost my mom to brain cancer, and I was kind of rebuilding my life. And I was like, hey, Tim, like, what do you think about me joining the force again? And he was excited to move me back in. So yay.
Yeah, we are certainly pumped to have you. As you know, I've told you many times off screen.
Hi, Megan.
I think so. It's pronounced Megan, which is so.
Megan.
That's okay. We get it wrong every other episode, and so she's wonderful and grateful and like graceful in reminding us. So, but Megan is a regular. We love having her, and she also joins us for Upskillerator quite often. So you'll see her in our smaller group as well. So
Awesome.
And Megan, as always, thank you for hopping in. Thank you for giving a shout out to our joiner here today. So Megan just commented here as a cultural I almost said whatever I about said was not the right word. Anthropologist, I love your research of the intersections of personal and cultural identity. I couldn't agree more. You can feel the passion when you're talking about it, which I think is like such an important piece of what we do, right? And so how fun to be able to. I'm not the only one catching it, right? Because I get to hear you and I get to talk to you every other day, I feel like, at this point with the human stack stuff. So it's fun to know that others are hearing that passion as well. So Megan definitely also has a lot of passion and certainly a social justice warrior in her own right. So we always love having her join us. So Tim totally bailed on us today. I was going to have a whole pun war because, as you all know, I live for the puns that I develop for these lives. It's like half of the fun of doing them for me. And Tim decided to start throwing puns in for his Upskillerator content. And I was like, I think at one point I messaged the Slack group and I said something about it being copyright infringement, and I didn't give them any context. And so the whole team was like, I'm going to need you to explain, which I found hilarious. And I definitely waited a little bit before I let them know what I was talking about. But Tim and I have been like fighting via puns for at least 3 weeks now. And so I was like, what better way to sort of like go back to the basics and show some of the things that we do with like a good old fashioned popular. This whole thing planned, and then he texted this morning, was like, I'm out, can't do it. Probably just because he needed to sleep or something, because he doesn't do any work ever, I swear. No, Tim's out doing, he's actually, I think he's traveling right now. And he is presenting to a group here shortly. So as much as I want to give him flack, he actually does do important things. So we asked Joni to sort of jump on, and as a, you know, a former ED of a nonprofit, and as someone who is pretty tech savvy, I mean, you understand and you adapt to technology pretty quickly. I mean, you worked at Now It Matters. Tim pulling you into the human stack and you adopting so quickly to sort of all the chaos that we have going on. There's a lot of tech use within that. And because of how much Tim and I in particular play with the tech in front of us, it's an extra like, whoa, baby, of learning. And so you've jumped in really well. But you made a couple good points this morning as we were kind of like, do we stick to the plan of the pun war? Do we pivot and maybe save that? And I think for the sake of entertainment purposes alone, we're going to save the pun war. I actually may see if Dan Kershaw can join us next week, and he can be our like, I did not know my phone was on high. I don't know if you heard that ring or not. But maybe Dan can be our like MC or our referee in some ways, because that's always fun to have him do as well. But we were talking about your work in nonprofit and sort of the way in which like you haven't really played in AI as it relates to the work in that space. And we thought this is a perfect opportunity to sort of treat this as like a fresh start and onboarding for nonprofit leaders, right? And so the goal of today's episode is really just to hear some of the day-to-day or week-to-week struggles that you felt as, you know, a nonprofit practitioner, a former ED. I know before the episode we talked about like constituencies that are hard to connect to because you don't have same relations to their lived experiences, or just pure like timing and resource management. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of AI and how we can utilize it to enhance and increase capacity. And also kind of reminding everyone as we go, like what this does is get you 70% of the way there, right? Like 20% is what you put into it. And then 10%, that last 10% is really what you do with it once you get the output that you need. So to kind of give the state of play for everyone, the goal today is, let's see. I tried really hard not to ask too many leading questions before the episode because I want Joni to just give her experience as she had it and show the different ways. A, you guys know that it is way more fun for me to just play as we go than to pre-plan too much anyway. And B, it's a fun way for Joni to also stop us and be like, okay, I see what you're doing, but explain to me why this makes sense, or help me understand how, like, I see what you made there, but like so many times we see people playing, right? And they're like, okay, but that's not what I need. It's like, okay, that's great, but we got you at least 20% of the way there. So let's keep going. And so this gives us that chance to sort of like organically do it. So Joni, I would love to hear, I know some of the first things that came to our mind was like board reporting, impact reporting. But what I'd love to hear is, we'll get into some of those. I want to lean us into some of those, but I want to sort of like ask you a few questions, have you explain some of the things that you did as a nonprofit ED that would allow me to show just the basic interface of AI. And I should mention, I apologize, before we even get into that piece, I do want to talk through why we use Gemini. But before, like, so as a lead into that, can you tell me sort of what exposure you've had to the different AI tools, what you know of them, what you thought about using them for, sort of everything in between here?
Yeah. So I've used ChatGPT and Claude most. Claude is, I think, a better language model, more natural, and has, better connections for the things that I wanted to use it for. And the way that I've used it, there's a lot of different ways that I've used it, but I started out using it sort of to help me gather grant information from previous grants that I'd written, and then help me provide answers to future grants that I am trying to write. Or I've used it for designing verbiage for letters to donors, or, you know, job descriptions for employees or volunteer descriptions. I've also used some AI features in other programs like Canva. You know, they have it's a little clunky, but that they have a feature where you can use AI. And then and I've looked for ways to sort of incorporate it in my overall work. Mostly because as an ED, the biggest challenge that I continually ran up against was my own capacity. Like my own capacity was what I needed more of. And so I would, you know, work to expand that by building into my employees and, you know, my volunteer staff, and trying to have processes and systems in place that would, you know, expand my capacity. And that's what databases are, right? So I did Salesforce for, you know, 10 years, and that was really to expand my capacity. I didn't have to hold all those data pieces anymore. You know, I could build things in it that would be replicable. So when I'm thinking about how I've used AI, it's really been that expanding my own capacity. But also the more recent things I was kind of thinking about, but not totally fleshed out, was really taking it back a step from not just giving it information and making it tell me what I already know, but helping me reframe. For example, program design is a great one. Helping me sort of reframe program design around the group that we're serving or the constituents that we're serving.
Oh, I love that.
Pause.
No, that's really helpful. I think Tim would often agree with you, and he's not here to disagree, so it doesn't matter. About Claude. That does tend to be the one that he and I actually lean toward in a lot of ways. I think there's some ethical framework around at least Claude in the beginning. They're leaning a little more now toward not a lack of ethics or not a degradation of their current ethical framework. Claude it's an under program of an organization called Anthropic that actually was founded from OpenAI founders who wanted a more sort of like ethically barriered framework. And so they still have that at their core. I think, you know, it used to be things like if you'd have to affirm and opt into sharing data instead of an automatic opt-in, like a lot of these other language models, some of that stuff. They've since made some alterations there, but I know Tim and I typically play in Claude the most as far as, and the MCP connections, which I'm not going to get too in the weeds there. Basically, it's automatic connections to things like your email, your notebooks, your Google Drive even. So like a lot of the work we do in Gemini, I can almost duplicate in Claude, and then I can connect it to other things too. So if you're really in the like, I want to be able to connect all the things, that's where we've used Claude quite a bit. But I think you've opened up a really good, and we talked a little bit about this before the episode. There are a lot of players in this game, and it feels like there's these big news releases around them every week too. Like I was just listening this week and yesterday, ChatGPT, which is OpenAI, they just released Atlas, which is a browser. So like right now I'm in Chrome, and it's an equivalent of Chrome, but for ChatGPT. There's also a feature that I wasn't ready to highlight last week, and I don't know that it's worth a whole episode, but you can now actually use Gemini in your Chrome browser. So like there's just all these things constantly being released that it can feel super overwhelming. And so I think this kind of gives us a really good opportunity to remind everybody why we're highlighting Gemini. State of play, right? You've got 4 companies. You've got Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. Under those, they each have their own language learning model. They may have different versions. They may have different, you know, pieces to them. But if we were to like try to compare apples to apples here, Microsoft has Copilot, Google has Gemini, OpenAI has ChatGPT, and then Anthropic has Claude. Generally speaking, all of those are what we call that language learning model. What that means is they operate from natural language. That doesn't mean AI just like came up out of nowhere, right? Like we know that. The idea that I could years ago plug my phone into my car for CarPlay and it knew that on Tuesdays at 5 I was heading to class in Westchester, Ohio. It knew that because it was picking up on patterns and creating artificial intelligence, or its artificial intelligence was creating an assumption that was on Tuesdays at 5 I was probably heading to class. Perfectly fine. Reminding everyone that AI has existed for quite a while. This is the first time we've been able to talk to AI in the Tim and Sami way, right? Where we're able to say like, wait, pause. That was stupid. Tell me more. Or, hey, I need you to help me with this one thing and I can't really put my thumb on how to explain it. So I'm just going to like babble for a second and see if you can help me figure it out. Talking to it sort of like person to person. That's really where this sort of like the gasoline was poured on the fire. And we've seen that across the board now. And that is what that Claude, OpenAI, Gemini, and Copilot allow us to do. Now there's sort of like a subsect in there. You've got Claude and ChatGPT, which those two with some of their MCP connections sort of mimic what we're trying to do over in Gemini, which is create an infrastructure where everything is run through and kept in the same, I'm just going to call it like circle, right? Tim's a lot better at some of the technical terms. And sometimes I get confused when he uses the technical terms anyway. But basically, they are still sort of their own thing. I don't have like ChatGPT email. I don't have a ChatGPT document storage. Whereas, and similar with Claude, same idea. So right now they're trying to connect over to your SharePoint, your Outlook, your Gmail, your Google Drive, because they don't have Microsoft have the benefit and the lead in a lot of cases. And I am coordinating. I've got, my Google Forms are already collecting my program data. My email is in Gmail. My document storage is all in Google Workspace. I already then have that benefit of I trust the Google infrastructure. I'm on a SOC 2 compliant security system. And Gemini, what they did was they built their LLM to fit right in that model. And so there is a Gemini for business, and then there's a Gemini for like out in the world. Gemini for like my personal email would be a lot like ChatGPT. Gemini, when I'm using it from the business perspective, under like we have under the human stack, like that's where I do a lot of my demos, is under our human stack Gemini. And with that, the awesome part of that is anything I'm putting in here is still built under that same SOC 2 compliant, secure infrastructure circle that would be the human stack. So anything that I'm also creating document wise, any of that stuff, it's all still in that same circle. So if I already have privacy protocols around that, if I have security protocols around that, I'm not busting any of those. Similarly, though I'm much less knowledgeable on it, would be Copilot in the same vein, right? So where Microsoft and Google have the lead and have the benefit is I've already trusted their infrastructure. I'm already so deep into their company that if I'm going to go in on AI from a secure perspective and from an ease of use perspective, from a cost-effective perspective, it makes so much more sense to go with either Copilot or Gemini. Enter Tim and I, knowing that we love how Google offers 75% off. So it's free for nonprofits for their base level. It's 75% off if you want to go one step up. So instead of it being $20 a month per person, it's like $4. So if you want to add some of that usability, some of the things we do on Gemini, it's $4 a person a month. It's just so much more accessible to enable your AI across an organization and still maintain that it is IP and it is secured by the organization. So you don't have a program director putting program information in ChatGPT just to then come back and say, well, I built all this stuff and here's all these cool ideas. Well, that now just lives in some other infrastructure that the organization no longer has access to. And in a lot of ways, AI tends to, if you treat it like sort of like an additional, especially the language learning model, if you treat it like an additional person, you're losing multiple people if that person goes, right? Everything they've built goes with them. And if they've built things on behalf of the organization, if that's how you got to maybe a program build that you have today, how do you find that again? How do you get there? And so I think that is sort of the next piece that we're here. And I know this is kind of like a long way to get us here, but I'm kind of taking advantage of the opportunity to like re-explain this stuff because Tim and I tend to forget. And of course, he called me like in the middle of a date with Jenny yesterday because I sent him some like inflammatory news article. And I was like, I need to talk to you about this. And so naturally we got on the topic of AI4AnyoneLIVE after that. And we were talking about how we forget that people aren't as like into this as we are, right? And yes, it is very interesting for many people, but they aren't like living and breathing this like we are. And so we take for granted that even the connections of Anthropic to Claude and OpenAI to ChatGPT, Google to Gemini, Microsoft to Copilot, like those are things that Tim and I take for granted every day that we just know that there are so many people who are just now learning or don't know that yet, let alone why our series, though, like we are not a partner of Google. We don't get anything from Google to do it this way. We just feel like Google, one, it helps that Tim's company infrastructure we build through Google, right? Like we use Gmail and some of that stuff. But also it is the easiest to enable across an organization that we're trying to target, which is those smaller, sort of like scrappy nonprofits. Typically nonprofits that are working in that Microsoft infrastructure tend to be a little larger. They've got the resources to play, to learn, to hire consultants to do some of this. So I apologize for kind of like getting really into that, but this is such a good opportunity for us to really just like pull it all the way back down and remind ourselves like where we started and where we've come and why we're doing it the way we are. Shout out to Micah here, who I really appreciate the clarification too, because the last thing I want to do is bore people too, right? That is zero interest for me. But reminding folks that there is a reason we're in Gemini and with the security piece, and Tim can speak to that a heck of a lot better than I can. But I so appreciate knowing that I can tell, like anytime I have a nonprofit come to me saying like they're wondering about using AI, but they've got concerns in this, that, or the other location. And then we're able to be like, I'm like, are you in Google or Microsoft? Like that's always my first question, because I'm like, if they're in Google, I've got 8 things off the top of my head they can do to help fix this, or at least start. If they're in Microsoft, I'm not there yet. There's only like, and I'd like to be, I think Tim and I would both like to be, we're also trying to balance like, where does the priority of our time need to go from an education perspective as well. So maybe next year we'll do a whole year on Copilot, who knows? But all of that to say, I would love to just get in, show you how we get to Gemini even, and then start playing around with some of the scenarios you set up. And then I'll ask you a few questions to kind of pull out other scenarios in there as well. I also think for those of you who are tuning in and those of you who are regulars, you definitely know this, but if they're like, hey, try this thing out, send it in, right? Like put it in the comments, because you know that I love to pivot mid-episode anyway. And I think it's such a good opportunity, like a unique opportunity for us to be able to show things that are applicable for you all. And so definitely please let us know if there's something in here that you're like, try this out. So I am going to get on the homepage and I'm going to share my screen here. Da-da-da-da. Window. Got way too many windows open. Okay, so you should see my Google.
Yep.
With that, I always just type in Gemini, because frankly, I just forget to go here. But if you're signed in to your account, which I am, you can go straight here and it just goes right to Gemini. The other thing you can do is literally just type in Gemini and it'll show up. This is what most people are used to seeing in any sort of language learning model, right? Like we're just right here in a regular old chat. So I'm going to say I'm sitting here with Joni, and we're talking about what was the phrasing that you used? I really liked it. It was like social. I'm just gonna say we're talking about her previous work as an executive director of a small nonprofit. How many staff did you have?
15.
And how she used AI to look
expand my capacity.
Well, I kind of want to say look at previous grants.
Yeah.
And how
specifics.
Create new applications. She also mentioned using a, you'll know that I never spell right. Actually, I'm impressed that I haven't messed up spelling more already. She also mentioned using AI to expand her capacity in that role. Today, we're exploring different ways we can use Gemini to do all of that. Thoughts? So this is a perfect example of like, this is not your, like there's different frameworks you can use for prompting. This is not one of them, right? And I will say, if you are looking for a very intelligent, specific, ready to use output, you should spend the most of your time on the input. Very similar to, I'm going to assume it was Einstein. I think it was, but the comment that if I've got, an hour to solve a problem, I'm taking 59 minutes to really figure out what the actual what the problem is before I worry about the 1 minute it takes to find the solution. Very similar. In this case, though, we're using it as that true, like I am talking to someone asking for their thoughts, right? Yeah. Like I use AI best when I get a brainstorm with it. So I'm just like, hey, I'm sitting here with Joni. We're talking about her previous work. Like, what do you think about the ability to use Gemini in this space and with this role in mind, right? Like at its core, that's what we're checking out. So a couple things that this is doing. I love the way Gemini in particular summarizes how it's thinking, because I feel like I can understand. I don't know how it knows that this is what I think, because I don't think it changes person to person. Like ChatGPT, you can it'll start to, like my ChatGPT swore at me the other day because it knew that that's just who I am. Gemini isn't necessarily at that spot, particularly the ones that are enabled under your enterprise. But I love that I'm like, okay, it is, for lack of a better term, I would say it's dumbing it down, right? Like it is telling me in my language, like, here's what it's doing, trying to figure out who is Joni? What is she looking at? Like all this stuff. This is so funny. Now it thinks it's talking to you. So if it's ever thinking and you're like, what is it thinking about? Like why? Because I didn't think it would need that long to think about this. I was like, what is it thinking about? I love this. So hello, Joni. Great to meet you. It's a fantastic topic, and you're right at the forefront of how leaders at small but mighty orgs can leverage AI. Well, how sweet. It's in love with you, Joni. It's so nice. That's one thing. One of our friends will always say, like, okay, well, of course, AI, like you ask it something, and of course it's gonna be like, that's a brilliant idea. And then you have to like remind it, like, okay, now play devil's advocate or something. You can't just say, don't lie to me or don't just beef me up, because it wants to do what the end user is going to feel most satisfied with. And so of course it's going to say like, it's so great to meet you. I'm so excited. Like, this is such a great topic. Like, of course it's a great topic. We're not asking stupid questions. There really aren't stupid questions. We just want to know like what your thoughts are. So it came up with a couple ideas here, which I love, right? So I love the grant writing co-pilot idea. And I actually think there is a way that we could maybe explore creating what's called a gem. You might know them as assistants or custom GPTs or similar. But I think we could actually take that idea of, I go all the way into like, how do I make a workflow that automatically generates most of the application for somebody based on past won applications and past awarded applications from that org, right? Don't get me wrong, that's awesome. That takes hours and hours of setup and a lot of resources to build. A grant writing co-pilot gem we could do in 5 minutes on this episode. I think we should. And then we're able to show folks how they could do it on their own. Like, I think this is a great segue into that. So let's put a pin in that one because I think that's a great example of how we can demonstrate that gem piece. I want to see what else it came up with though. The force multiplier. This is where you get your time back. As an ED, you're constantly switching contexts. It can be your specialist in any of those contexts. So donor comms, marketing and storytelling, operations, HR and board management, strategic planning and program development. I love that it puts like SWOT analysis for your org or your programming, or, you know, I love that it I found these articles. Does it know who you are? Trauma-informed care. That's scary.
I mean,
out who you are, but maybe you are in the human stack infrastructure, and so maybe it's like assuming you're that Joni. I have no idea. That's actually a little creepy, or it's a fair thing to just.
I think program development. If we could pause right there, like that blows my ED brain up, right? Because I'm looking. Like I read through that list and I see the things that it can do right now. And I see, okay, if it can do that, then it can probably do this. So let me give you an example. I have a master's in human services, right? So I have been in public administration and human services for my entire career. And traditional human services, which is what we have here in the United States, is based on Western frameworks. It's based on imperialist philosophy. It's based on colonialism, right? Because that's the system that we're in. So the core problem solving framework, or the core operating system of human services, is problem solving. People have a problem. People are broken. They need fixed. Evidence-based outcomes. And of course, the evidence is all building to the Western framework, right? Scale is your impact. So more people served equals greater success. It's expert driven. So like you are the professional as the service provider delivering services to the client. And then it measures impact in sort of a typical capitalist sort of structure, right? So if you look at human services as a system, what it does really is it operates within colonialism and acts as a pressure valve for colonial harm, right? Because colonialism is causing harm, but nonprofits release enough tension to prevent the system from collapsing, but they don't actually stop the harm production. They extract the relationship, and the system requires that people are continued to be harmed because otherwise we don't function, right? So my question, what brought to mind like this conversation and another conversation I had is I was meeting with the director of a nonprofit that served Native Americans on the East Coast. And so it was a collection of tribal oriented people. And I approached it as human services would. And I'm like, okay, what is the problem to be solved? Here's how we can apply, the Western framework to solve your problem, right? So I'm like, I propose that we do a youth program. And she came back to me and that really turned her off. And I was like, wow, okay. Like I'm proposing an evidence-based framework that has won me many grants. And you're saying like, that doesn't work for you. So that made me step back. And I was like, okay, what am I missing here? And what I was missing was the people, the culture, the cultural context, right? So their approach, a decolonized approach to human services, would be that healing, rather than being a problem, like we're solving a problem by healing people, healing is actually restoring a connection to body, to story, to community, to place, to ancestors. So it's about relationship repair. It's about healing the person backward and forward, right? 7 generations thinking. It's about the world that we can touch, the people that we can actually reach. It's about sharing knowledge and understanding that different generations have different knowledge gaps, different knowledge abilities. So when I thought about proposing a youth program to a Native American group, what I was really saying is we want to take part of your community and indoctrinate it with Western imperialism and remove it from the structure that builds your system. Their system is built around relationship, multi-generational relationships. And she said, hey, what I really need you to do is have a multi-generational program that can bring all of the generations together into this program. And I need you to look at our outputs and the things that we view as success. Well, that for me, like with a master's level education in Western frameworks, was a new language. Like, I don't know what that looks like. And so could AI, like, can it expand my mental capacity, ask me questions about what it is that I'm trying to do beyond me giving it instructions? Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're also blowing my mind a little bit. So, but yes, no, it does make sense. And I think a simpler version of what you're saying is there are so many times that nonprofit practitioners are trying to do good, but they are also trying to help a constituency that they perhaps don't have that lived experience relation to. So let's look through. I want to figure out how to use AI to help me.
Build a program for.
Well, help me analyze any program I may be building.
Oh, good idea.
The context would be that I am here with good intentions as a nonprofit practitioner who wants to do good in many constituencies, some of which I may not relate to. Example, children-focused programming, but the constituency I don't relate to may be a Native community. They may see this as Western imperialism. Imperialism / indoctrination. Whatever. Rather than me trying to help. Further, I may actually do the harm they fear, even if I am being truly altruistic.
And I think this prompt is really cool because what it is like you're saying, my intent is this, but I need to make sure that my impact aligns with my intent, right? And before we had the ability to kind of put ourselves in a different set of shoes, we didn't have that access, right? I think that is a really cool opportunity.
I think of Megan, right, who is in charge of Roots Ethiopia. And Megan, if I'm right, you're located in the States for the most part. And so she's working with a constituency that she's not with every day, right? Mm-hmm. And when she's there, she's not living that experience every day. So Megan, a chronic listener of AI4AnyoneLIVE, like this is a really good example of something that she's living every day. I think through like the native example you gave is so poignant for me. I live in South Dakota. There are almost 10 native tribes, like big native tribes here. And then of course there are subsects of those. Our legislator has native language, like we use the Dakota Lakota language in some of our openings. Those are things I'm worried I said something wrong because that's how much I don't relate to that constituency, right? And so I'm out here trying to represent South Dakota and our native our native constituencies, and I actually don't know if I'm doing that right now even. Mm-hmm. But I do know that in order for me to make any sort of mission-focused program delivery nonprofit successful in my state, in South Dakota, I have to understand that fundamental constituency, that fundamental community, and make sure that I love the phrasing that you gave me. And I'm actually so glad I got like it captured in the text, which is, how do I make sure my impact aligns with my intent for each constituency? I think that's a brilliant idea. So what we may do is I'm going to read through what this says, and I might build 2 different gems. I think the gem is a really easy one. But we can also hop on and build it next week, right? Like there's literally nothing stopping us. I may want to do like a pour, but that can always wait. It's fine. Like look at this, right? AI assisted impact alignment framework. So, and this is without deep research, which for those of you that have logged on with like a Dan Kershaw, like the next step would be, okay, how do I make this deep research? Joni is, and you may know, but for those that maybe don't as well, deep research is a tool within Gemini and many other language learning models that would allow you to actually go and create effectively a white paper on the topic. Then you can create more based off of that, but then you've got sort of like the industry expert language within that. So we're doing this sort of like, I want to try and keep it high level, that someone could duplicate what we're doing today as it relates to them. And so I'm trying really hard not to go like, because I was already over on the side trying to do like a deep research on the grant gem, right? So I'm trying not to. But I love this, right? AI assisted impact alignment framework. Phase 1, pre-design. So before we even write anything about our program plan, let's understand the constituencies' context, especially through their own voices. So gather public-facing documents, reports from their community leaders, how you would use AI. So maybe you could use AI to gather some of these, right? Like that's where a deep research could come in, and you could focus it on your public-facing documents. But then looking in, you've got, okay, we're going to feed this into Gemini and use prompts to synthesize it. I love that it gives us some example prompts, right? Like I've uploaded this, summarize key cultural values, historical traumas, community stated priorities relating to, and this is focused on children's education, right? So what we could do is, cultural values, historical traumas, and community stated priorities related to anything that literally you could just put anything that has to do with the mission delivery of my nonprofit, which is X, right? So love that. Based on these articles, what are common criticisms this community has about outside nonprofit programs?
Yes, that's a beautiful question.
And like, we look at, every time I do this stuff, I'm like, why haven't I done that?
Right.
I do this stuff every single day, and I forget that there are ways to do this. So I love the like, listening to you go on about the passion that you have about it, and like the barriers that you hit helped us build something crazy here, right? So like, look at this. So let's even take that. So I'm going to do it side by side here, and I'm going to use our Impact Me foundation, right? So I'm going to ask it to gather the public facing documents because I really don't know. And I'm not going to do deep research. Gather public reports from, help me complete this task for the native tribes of South Dakota as it relates to them. I suppose at first it doesn't really ask to give it specific context around the program, right? So we'll ask it to do that while we kind of read what's next here. And like I said, using a deep research, using maybe like a different tool that is known for its, I actually really love the deep research in Gemini. It tends to be one of the most accurate and one of the most comprehensive. They're also very long, right? Like they give you very long outputs, which I of course love, but, and then maybe we'll say, okay, so based on these articles, I'm going to maybe do this. So based on these articles, what are common criticisms this community has about outside nonprofit programs? I'm just going to prep that up. Specifically as it might relate to implementing our, and this is a piece that I haven't really been able to show you yet, Joni, is like I can add straight from my Google Drive, right? So now I need to figure out where I store all this stuff because I know it's not in the right folder. Every time Tim tries to find it, he can't. And I giggle a little bit. Okay, human first something. I forget it every time. So I'm going to actually load in all of these, right? Like here's like a board report we built on a call previously and some of this stuff. What this is, it's our AI ethics or AI learning and ethics program. So It's not a real program, but it's the made up program under Impact Me Foundation that we use often for some of our demos. So
Cool.
Specifically as it might relate to implementing our AI learning and ethics program at Impact Me, which I also want to give it a little context about Impact Me, which Tim's made a point. There's definitely something we could do in the future on like how I built all of these. Cause I could tell you about our CEO, about our, like, they're all based off of the like Bugs Bunny, though I did hit a lot of copyright infringement issues trying to build them. That was kind of fun, but okay. So before I hit go, reports and statements from community leaders. So I love this. Dean Wakeman said search bar can help find stuff. Oh, you mean like in the tools? Oh, brilliant. I thought he was a little bit being cheeky. Like you could also just look this stuff up online, which is completely fair. And I would love if our like viewers were actually being that cheeky. So that was not a shade at all. But I appreciate that I was actually just him trying to be helpful. I usually rely on Tim to be the shady one. So, but if you look at this, right, like, so the Oyate I think you pronounce, I know it's Oyate, it's Omnichie, I think. But that's the Oglala Sioux tribe. We also have an Oglala Lakota. And I love that it gives, so like, this is what's awesome, right? Is I can see this is testimony to U.S. House Subcommittee. It also gave me the link, so I could double check that. It tells me when. That's actually super recent, which is awesome to see that. Fun fact, Pine Ridge is the third poorest county in the entire country, which is crazy, right? Like to think in little old South Dakota that most people don't even think of. We also have the poorest county in the country. But I mean, look at this, right? Like it went for relevancy first, but it also tried to get a widespread of the tribes. This is crazy. I love that this got the tribal government websites, the news outlets. It's focusing on academic papers, right? Like it's really pulling, and this is not deep research, right? Like deep research would have been crazy, like this on steroids. This is basically just like, here's sort of what you asked for, right? I wonder if I want to see if it shows me the one I'm thinking of. This is actually very similar to what you've been kind of talking about, Joni, the Rosebud Defending Childhood Initiative. The goal may have been genuine and altruistic, but the output actually a pretty abhorrent response, unfortunately. And so I also love, like, we've got here's failed or controversial versus these were successful and community led. Like this one's a good example of it started out really poor because of exactly the things that you listed, right? Like the concerns for colonization, sort of what did you call it? Indoctrination, like some of that stuff, but crazy.
Well, also trust is the bottom line on that, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to put in, based on these articles, what are common criticisms, specifically as it might relate to implementing our program at Impact Me. Included here are program docs and Impact Me info docs. So kind of give it that context. While that's loading, Dean said, I'm always cheeky, but I meant when you're in Google Drive to find docs, which I do appreciate the clarification. This wasn't included because it was a form, which I do think is very interesting. Also, I don't think I realized it did not actually include what I thought when I clicked the extras, the Impact Me Foundation. Nope, didn't include that. So who knows if it'll catch that or not. But I love this, right? Like focusing on the specific criticisms voiced by them, extracting themes, where are program gaps currently, meaning in our program, pinpointing those flaws, unpacking concerns that the tribes might have. I mean, this is so fun. I'm so glad that you brought this up today. Like how amazing. This is just really fun for me. Because this is sort of what I was talking to Tim about last week of like, this is where the practitioners can see how this work relates, right? And how you can get from, no, you're not going to get there in 2 prompts. You are not going to get this in depth with those 2 prompts. I mean, we started over here, right? And we haven't even gotten through phase 1 of this piece. Like it is still work. And that's where I think when I get really heated when people are like, oh, well, you used AI. And so they feel like that's a cheat somehow. And I'm like, the work like the mental load, the work that you're putting into something like this the output is so much yours. Like, it's crazy. Like, that part just really, and I need to find a better way to explain it, because this is literally phase 1 of what is, I think, at least 4 phases, right? Just to analyze a program we have and whether or not we want to build this program around this constituency, or if there's another approach we need to have, right? So common criticisms like one size fits all, disrespect for sovereignty, misaligned priorities, echoing historical trauma, exactly like what you had talked about, potential risks that I gave us. So this is just like common criticisms of overall outside interventions, right? Now it's got one specific to our AI ethics program, maybe
Yes.
and
ethics as assimilation. Ethics as another tool of colonization. Let's align all of everyone's ethics to a universal Western framework. Why don't we?
Well, and that's exactly it, right? Like, but think about someone like, I remember 22-year-old doe-eyed Sami, who would have loved the chance to bring an awesome program to the native tribes. And I wouldn't have even thought about this. Not because I'm like, oh, I want to bring Western ethics there, but because I think I want to help people. I want to help the third poorest county in my nation that also happens to be in my backyard. You know what I mean? Like, this allows people to put themselves in different shoes without feeling the shame of it as well, which I think is so helpful. Like, I love everything about the example you had us walk through. I know we talked about a grant gem. I'll build it next week. I don't care. This is awesome. And I love that it gives us mitigation risk, like risk mitigation tactics as well.
Yeah.
You can see it's using the impact me values, right? So for internal muscle, not external dependence, trauma-informed tech actually does happen to be something that we wrote into those ethics, right? So like, are into those values. So you can see it's like, okay, make sure as long as you are sticking to your values and you are considering these risks, you are doing not everything, but as much in your power as possible, right? So let's see if we can't get through like at least phase 2 in here, right? So we can, but I have no problem picking this back up next week as a part 2. Joni, I have no idea if you're available or not, but you might have to be, so we can keep going with this. But okay, so it's phase 2. This is where you check your own materials, which is funny. We kind of skipped that now that I think about it, because I brought it in up here. So I'm going to actually copy all of these and say, consider these prompts as it relates and answer each. Like, let it kind of help me through, okay, review the program description. You don't have to paste the text because it's up there. Analyze it, since we were already kind of talking through some of that, some of that piece. I think that'll be really, really helpful. And while that's going, let's look at AI as a skeptical stakeholder. I love that language. That is where I think we should pick up next week. I do think if you're free, we should absolutely continue this project, and then we can build the grant co-pilot next week as well. But that, I think this allows us to show, because then we could build this into a gem, or I can build on Canvas some sort of like interactive checker here. But I love this. And this is like my bread and butter. I absolutely love hopping in and hearing from our folks, like, how do I make this the most relevant possible?
And it's not just increasing my capacity, it's lighting me up. It's using AI to really stoke my passion and excitement about the work that I'm doing. And that is the coolest part of it for me. Like, tech is so extractive in so many ways, but when it can feed you and give you joy and remind you your purpose, like, that is so badass.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was going to go through it, but we have 4 minutes before we're supposed to be off. And I think this is supposed to be a 45-minute session that we never make last 45 minutes. First of all, thank you so much. This has been so fun to like get in and play. Tim and I make a lot of jokes about us and him being inept and all these things. But one thing that I really appreciate about Tim and I is we love to play, but that also means we've been doing, I mean, I've been playing in this stuff for 5 years now. And that comes with its own drawbacks. And you have been playing it in a way that allows you to know something's possible, but you haven't been doing it in the way Tim and I have. And so you and I, like, our ability to pair these visions and like put it to life, right? Like, you heard what you were going to prompt versus what I prompted and what we got from that. So it helps open some of that up. But then I can be like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought about it in this respect. And you heard me, like, those tribes are in my backyard.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about sort of that, like, how do I have this out of body experience? How do I analyze for the cultural sensitivities that I'm not considering because I am a white Anglo-Saxon woman in the middle of South Dakota?
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with being who I am. It is important that I recognize what I don't know and who I'm not. And I think you have shown how to make AI human in a way that Tim and I in 27 episodes have not been able to do. And that's crazy. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us last minute. I don't ever want Tim to come back. That's not true. Quick last minute things. I do want to highlight this week's Giving Tuesday. Participate. They're on week 7. It's all about crafting your story and marketing and communications. I definitely highly suggest everyone get on that. Giving Tuesday has a 12 weeks leading up to Giving Tuesday, sort of a almost like if you know nothing about how to prep yourselves in your org for Giving Tuesday, start here. These are great examples of like copy the whole page, put it into whatever LLM you're using and say, hey, how do I do this in whatever time capacity you have for the week for my org? Like, there's your cheat sheet for the week. Shout out to Giving Tuesday for this free resource. I absolutely love it. I love working with a group at Giving Tuesday. I know Tim works really closely with them. So much appreciated on all of those fronts. Joni, I think unless you literally aren't able to, I'm going to have you join us next week so we can maybe make a part 2. I'm going to have to come up with a better pun. I'm going to have to come up with some emergency so Tim can't join because I want him here, really. But no, thank you so much. We're so excited to have you sort of back, but also on the Human Stack team. I'm so excited to be working with you. And thank you everybody for joining. We'll talk to you next week. I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we head out, Joni. I know we got to hop over to our upskillerator for the week.
Sayonara.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so